Welcome to Gamecock Pod Live.
For the next 3 to 4 years, I'll be committed to the University of...
This is Rodgers again to the 25, 20, 15, 10. Rodgers scores! Jackie Bradley Jr. delivers for the Gamecocks. Lost it up, looking for Kelly. Touchdown! Can you believe it?
And South Carolina is sending shockwaves through the SEC.
Frederick! Plays it in at the buzzer! That's a win! Unbelievable! I don't believe it!
And now, live from Studio 54 of the Gamecock Pod Studios, here's the Cockfather himself, Keith Alsep.
All right. Good morning, everybody, and welcome into a special Gamecock Pod Live, a special day on Thursday, April the 16th, the day after Tax Day. I am your host, Keith Alsep, and we have a great show on tap for episode number 1988. In just a couple of minutes, we will be joined by the incomparable Lulu Kesin from the Greenville News and the USA Today Network. We will discuss all the latest happenings with Gamecock women's basketball, from reflecting back to the Final Four, to the WNBA Draft, to the transfer portal, and high school recruiting, and a couple of former Gamecocks, teammates and roommates on that first national championship team that are now making over $1 million a year in the WNBA. Just a few years ago, rookies were making $35,000 a year. Now they're going to make at least $600,000 per year. In the second half of the show, we will be joined by Alex Jones from thebigspur.com to catch up on all the latest happenings with Gamecock Football. Today's show, as always, brought to you by the award-winning full-service catering company servicing the greater Charlotte area. I'm talking about Nana's Porch, your go-to for all your catering needs, whether it's a banquet, a wedding, a corporate event, maybe it's a rehearsal dinner, a birthday, wedding anniversary, engagement, or graduation celebration. We know college graduations are going to start taking place in a couple of weeks. High school graduations late in May through June. It's wedding season. Go to nanasporch.com, NANASPORCH.com. Get in touch with my good friend Chris Payne. Let him know the folks at Gamecock Pod Live sent you. You're going to love it. I guarantee it. They will work with you to customize your menu. The customer service is second to none. The food is delicious. So if you have a catering event coming up, I strongly urge you to support this Gamecock-owned and operated business. You won't regret it. I promise you that. You can also support this Gamecock-owned and operated business, even if you don't have a catering event, by going to the homepage, looking up at the top, clicking on pimento cheese, and you can order one or both of Nana's Porch award-winning flavors of pimento cheese, available in the great regular flavor. My personal favorite, the smoky jalapeno. It's great to have in the refrigerator any time of year, especially now. Spring, summer is coming. It's good to have a snack or a pimento cheese sandwich with the best damn pimento cheese on the planet. All you have to do is click on pimento cheese. It will take you to a hyperlink. Checkout is simple, safe, and secure. It's affordably priced, and they will ship it right to your front doorstep. Nana's Porch, award-winning pimento cheese. You're going to love it. I guarantee it. All right, so we're going to talk a lot of Gamecock women's basketball, but real quick here before Lulu Kesin jumps on, Gamecock men's basketball picked up their second transfer portal acquisition, free agent acquisition in former Purdue and Texas swingman Camden Hyde, 6'7", 215. He is a native of Minnesota. He spent his first 2 years with Matt Painter at Purdue. Coming off the bench, he did start 8 games in the 24-25 season. He transferred to Texas with Sean Miller and played about 25 minutes per game. Well, 22.5 minutes. He started 29 games for the Longhorns. He shot 49% from the field and 45% from three, 49 for 108 on the season. Not a prolific free throw shooter. The most he's ever shot in a season is 36 at Purdue in 2024-25. But this is a legitimate piece. This is a guy that was on a Sweet 16 team at Texas, played a lot of minutes, and is a knockdown three-point shooter. And he has ideal size at 6'7", 215. Camden Hyde, the newest men's basketball commitment for the Gamecocks. Some of their targets have committed elsewhere. They are involved with other players. This guy kind of came out of nowhere, and all of a sudden you heard about an SEC player, John Whittle from the Big Spur, always doing a great job covering all things Gamecock men's basketball related. And then boom, it was announced. So we'll see. Lamont Paris still trying to hire 2 people on his staff. And so we'll just have to see what's going on. So one thing football-wise I will bring up, we'll also discuss it with Alex. So Shane Beamer, he met with the media on Tuesday, and he talked about Kendall Briles being a great fit for Lenora Sellers. Well, immediately the message board mafia took off with that, and they're like, oh yeah, well, he talked about Mike Shula being a great fit for Lenora Sellers. Well, it's not so much the person, even though it is the person, the personality, but I think more so in this case, it is the system. My friend Brad Lawing, God rest his soul, used to always have a saying that people didn't understand when it came to recruiting. There was nothing about it that was easy. In fact, he said the words recruit easy and recruiting do not even belong on the same page, maybe not even the same chapter of a book. And so I'm going to tell you right now, as we go out and bring in our good friend Lulu Kesin, who's been under the weather, but she's plowing through just for us. So fortunate today for that. But I'm just here to tell you the names Kendall Briles and Mike Shula do not belong on the same page. The only thing they have in common is Shane Beamer has now hired both of them to run South Carolina's offense. More on that later with Alex, but we're so pleased to have Lulu Kesin with us. Lulu, how's it going? How you feeling this morning?
Thanks for having me. I definitely don't feel great, but hopefully it's a new day and I feel better as the day goes on.
Awesome. All right, so I don't even think we've talked to you since the Final Four in Phoenix. So the team, they left straight from Sacramento and because they played on Monday night and went straight to Phoenix. Were you able to do the same?
Yeah, it was actually kind of fun. I mean, overall, it was 12 straight days on the road. I probably took one day off in March into April now that I think about it. But yeah, I flew out to California, then we flew right to Phoenix. There was like 7 of us on the same flight, all these reporters. And then we flew home at Monday out of Phoenix.
So yeah, I saw, I think Matt Dowell put together a photo of all of the local media, TV and print media that were there at the Final Four covering South Carolina. It's not always been that way where there's been that many people, but it's really great. Gamecocks get back to their 3rd straight national championship game. But first, we have to talk about UConn because we have to talk about Gino Auriemma absolutely losing his mind on the sidelines. But first, I mean, as you were sitting there watching that game and South Carolina's defense, I mean, even Rebecca Lobo, who I know it pained her to have to say, that South Carolina was the more comfortable team, the more physical team, and just put on a defensive masterclass against UConn with Azzi Fudd and Sarah Strong, 2 first-team All-Americans, the #1 pick in the WNBA Draft. They held them to 48 points. Strong, just 4 of 16. She ripped her own jersey. Obviously, Gino didn't know that. And Azzi Fudd just 3 for 15. And South Carolina 62 to 48. I mean, it was a grueling game. Physically, I think it took its toll on South Carolina. But just your thoughts as you were sitting there watching, especially after seeing what UConn did to South Carolina twice last year, including in the national championship game. Just your thoughts on that performance.
Yeah, and to be honest, I definitely felt like most of this season, looking at the potential UConn matchup, I thought that this was a game that South Carolina didn't necessarily have an excuse to lose because I feel as though last year, roster-wise, UConn was just better. There was kind of no contesting the offense that they brought. And while South Carolina had a lot of great talent on defense, you just kind of couldn't go shot for shot with UConn. This year, I felt like the rosters were really honestly kind of compatible. And I felt like South Carolina had the tools. It was just, okay, what version of South Carolina is going to show up? And then once I started to see how South Carolina played throughout the tournament, specifically, I felt, and I mean, this isn't really that big of a point because if you kind of look at the games, it's pretty obvious. But last year they played really well in the opening round, and then they kind of slugged their way through most of it. They barely beat Indiana. They barely beat Maryland, Duke. I don't want to say they got lucky, but it was a struggle to get to the Final Four. Whereas this year they plowed through everyone. Like even when TCU, a solid TCU team punched back, South Carolina was really mature. And so I definitely felt like going in, like on that plane ride from California to Arizona, I was like, South Carolina's winning this game. They have the tools. They have the matchups. Dawn has the coaching, not saying anyone's going to walk in there and outcoach Gino. I'm just saying, like, in that instance, it wasn't that they had this young coach that was like playing in their first big game. They had Dawn Staley. And I think that Coach Mary, it's kind of cool. Like all season long, I heard about how Mary is this X's and O's coach and how people are like, she's so smart. And that I think was really obvious in the scout and in the game plan. South Carolina knew UConn's first, second, third, fourth option. And I think that this was a UConn team that hadn't impressed me in March. Yes, obviously they hadn't lost a game. I kept kind of saying like better undefeated UConn teams had lost. So I was not going into it thinking that the fact that UConn was undefeated, they were going to remain undefeated heading into, the title game. I definitely felt like this was a UConn team that just had blemishes that hadn't yet found the matchup to be exposed yet.
Yeah, I mean, their only single-digit game had been Michigan. They won by 3 at Ann Arbor, but UCLA beat Michigan by 50 in the Big Ten championship game, and then Texas housed them by 36 in the Elite Eight. All along, I mean, the last time you were on, it was after the brackets were revealed. We both thought UCLA should have been the number 1 overall seed. And I mean, now after the tournament, it's clear to see why. And not only that, but 6 seniors, all taken in the top 18 picks of the WNBA Draft, a record number of players drafted, in 5 first-round selections, also a record. I mean, so they played Texas after South Carolina and UConn, and it was a rock fight. Honestly, I picked Texas, but I was one of the few people, along with you, that did pick South Carolina to beat UConn because I just really did not respect the rest of their players outside of Fudd and Strong. And if you stop them, who else was going to have a big game? I mean, a freshman in the Final Four, Blanca Quinones. I mean, yeah, she had 20 in their Elite Eight win, but she wasn't even the best freshman on the floor in that game. That was Gotti, Agot McKeer, who, I mean, let's just talk about her play. A top 5 freshman, highly rated, obviously. It came down to really UConn and South Carolina. She chose South Carolina, a lot like Jerzy Robinson. After the season, she committed, then signed in April. She battled a couple of injuries. We really didn't get to see her until she finally got healthy down the stretch in the postseason. Honestly, I thought she was South Carolina's most consistent performer.
Absolutely. And I'm not saying this just to kind of like give us credit, but I feel like even when she showed like glimpses of promise before she was injured, you and I were both like, she's really good and she's going to be a really big impact player. And I feel like now people are starting to be like, oh, she was a secret, now she's not, but she has always shown that potential. I just think she couldn't get into a rhythm and she was missing games. But even when she started, I think her passing and her defense sticks out probably the most to me, not to mention she can score from pretty much anywhere on the court and isn't afraid of driving. I think having a long guard that is not afraid of driving, and I know that kind of might sound dumb, like what long guard isn't, but I feel like a lot of players kind of her stature aren't necessarily like, they stop and pop, whereas she will take it to the hole, similar to Tessa, like they will drive. And so I think that having that level of attack and that sort of downhill play that Dawn is losing with Tanaya now in the WNBA, and almost honestly Raven a bit this year too, like Gotti has shown some real maturity in the type of shots that she takes. And I think that on a team like South Carolina, where your role can change very quickly, Dawn might need you to play more of this one game and more of that the other. I think she's probably the most valuable player in that regard because of how versatile she is. And especially, like, I cannot wait to see her and Chloe on the court together just because of their length and the way that they play. And I think a lot, like Rakia Jackson made this point yesterday talking about playing with Camilla and said not a lot of people know how to pass into a post, into a center. And I think that
a lost art.
Yeah, and I think that Gotti does. And I think not having Raven, that's not to say Maddie McDaniel can't kind of fill that point guard role, but I think Gotti, what she'll probably be, I don't want to say forced, but like start early learning to do is like a high-low game with Chloe and Joyce. And that trio, I think, could be really, really great next year.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, just fearless, confident player. I thought she really hit her stride in the postseason. She even talked about it. You know, I'm not afraid. I'm healthy, and now you're just seeing. I'm taking what I have been doing in practice into the games, and the game. You clearly saw the game slow down for her. So South Carolina picked that one bad game. They played one bad game, and it was really almost reminiscent of the SEC tournament. Like you have this emotional, physical battle with LSU. Not a rivalry in the sense of South Carolina has won 19 straight games, but emotionally a big game. Then they play Texas, you know, about 18 hours later, and they just didn't have it. Even for the women now, since they've moved that championship game to the middle of the afternoon, that was like 12:30 Phoenix time. I mean, it's not even a day and a half. The men's Final Four, those semifinals end 48 hours before the national championship game. I'm not making excuses for South Carolina. I'm just saying this particular team in two very similar situations, well, different because that was their third game in 3 days in the SEC tournament. But for the second time in the postseason, after a big emotional win, it just seemed like they just didn't have it against UCLA. Even early, they just were missing layups and not, you know, getting out hustled for 50-50 balls. UCLA dominated the offensive glass, and South Carolina took their second straight blowout loss in the national championship game.
Yeah, and I think the hard part to sort of swallow was that it was back-to-back, because I do think both games, like individually, I think UCLA was one of the best teams. I think the best team in the country all season long, and I think UConn, South Carolina just didn't have that matchup. So it's unfortunate that they were both kind of these really bad losses in the title game, but I think too, and I thought for, like, I was on the, I don't want to say the South Carolina train, but after they'd beaten UConn, I was like, oh, they're, you know, I think the winner is this side of the bracket. Like I thought that, but at the same time, I always thought that UCLA was one of the best teams heading into it. And I also thought Texas was, like, Texas looked really great. I think the thing with UCLA that I didn't even, I'll admit, like, everybody had talked about, oh, you know, it's now or never for this group and their seniors, but they were old. Like Charlize Ledger-Walker is my age. And that's a player playing against an 18-year-old Agat McKeer. And that isn't necessarily to make excuses for South Carolina, but when we talk about why a team didn't show up and why a team did, emotional maturity. Like, I think that there was a little bit of like, okay, yeah, UCLA had never been in the title game before, but they were also 6 players that, you know, can compartmentalize and are mentally stronger. And I'm sorry, but I think of myself now versus myself when I was Agat and Joyce at his age, even Tessa, and it's a gap, it's a jump. And so I think that a lot of people counted out UCLA's lack of experience in the tournament itself and in the title games, ignoring the fact that regardless, you were battling against 6 really, really good veterans. And yeah, like to your point, when Gabriela Jaquez when she ran through and stole the offensive rebound to put it up for the and one when like 4 South Carolina players were sitting and watching, it was only 6-4 at that point, but I felt the game was over. I think those are tone-setting plays that you can't come back from. And Tessa missing a wide-open layup early, and then when Tanaya made a really great move to get downhill and it rimmed out, like those are – I asked a lot of the players, like, how difficult is it mentally? Like you hear all the time, I was a 3-point shooter, like keep shooting. But like it gets to a point when shots that you have seen go in are missing and you're like, it went in 2 hours ago in warm-ups. Like it's a mental toll on you. And I think that all sort of, I think they were mentally exhausted. And when a team is, because the honest difference maker in the first quarter was UCLA had the effort plays, but they're also hitting shots. If South Carolina had made shots that were wide open, like it's a different game. And so I do think that they swallowed themselves kind of similarly to where Texas could not miss in that SEC championship game. And that was after a very like tone setting, energetic start for them.
I agree. And the best thing about Gotti, Joyce Edwards, Alicia Turnabees played a good bit in that game is they're freshmen and sophomores. They're going to be sophomores and juniors next year. So first, 4 Gamecock seniors moving on. Mariam Dowda going to be with the Nigerian national team. Dawn Staley on Monday was at the WNBA Draft. Raven Johnson picked number 10 by Indiana, where she will reunite with Aaliyah Boston. And Stephanie White here, I think, is sending a message because they've also acquired another former Gamecock and national championship point guard, Ty Harris. Now you draft Raven Johnson the first round, and Indiana now has the Caitlin Clark killer, which is Raven Johnson, who defensively dominated her after the first 5 minutes of the national championship game when Dawn Staley put her on Caitlin Clark. Does that signal, do you think, a move off the ball more for Clark? Maybe not totally, but I don't think you bring in 2 point guards unless you're thinking about moving her off the ball to where maybe she's not always taking as much physical contact because clearly the injuries have piled up for her.
Yeah, I've seen a lot of Fever fans on Twitter like wondering if Caitlin's like all of a sudden going to announce that she's hurt just based on the fact that they're bringing in so many point guards. And obviously I think it's fair to be critical of a front office and a coach. Like I'm not saying that a fan can't sit here and have their opinions, but I do think that Stephanie White, she's not just throwing money at the wall, she's not just throwing ideas and seeing what sticks. She obviously has a plan. And I do think that she saw a valid vision in Raven, and obviously Raven's offense enhanced so much across the last year. And then I think that her defense, I don't think Raven was heading to a WNBA team expecting to take over anyone's point guard role. She's there to learn, and I think she's going to grow and develop even more at the next level. So I don't think, I do agree with your point and kind of that idea that it could be something where they're simply just moving Caitlin off the one spot and making her more of a 2 or giving her more options. I'm sure it's all done to benefit her and with her best, intentions in mind. And I'm sure if anything, it's allowing her to maybe take the pressure off from a passing standpoint and allow her to have more like scoring opportunities on the weak side or something like that. But I think it'll work out. I think, I was surprised that Tanaya fell to to the second round. I really don't agree with that. But that said, I really think LA is a really great landing spot for her, and I think she's going to do really well. And I like their GM. I like Lynn Roberts. I think she has good vision in mind, and they both really value a Dawn Staley trained player. So I do think and I think it'll be fun to see Medina. I think she can learn a lot from Angel Reese, and I think Angel's the right sort of personality to almost have her back, protect her. She's going to take her under her wing, which is kind of something that Medina needs. So I think all three landed in positions where they can thrive. And even if it's not in year one, I can't imagine that it's, not in year 2, year 3. I think the cool thing about the CBA and the WNBA, the longevity there is better, and you're not sending players overseas anymore because they didn't make roster spots. So I think that overall, another year where another 3 South Carolina players are, drafted into the W.
All right, no doubt. Medina Okot, by the way, 21 years old and only played 2 years of basketball in the United States. The NCAA denied her waiver. That's just in the WTF category. I don't understand that. So this current roster will return 4 national champions and 8 players that have played in the Final Four and in the national championship game. 3 high-profile freshmen joining the team. Yesterday was the first day of the spring signing period. Jerzy Robinson, who I don't understand how she's number 6 in ESPN's rankings. She's rated much higher by everybody else. A 6'1" guard from Sierra Canyon. Nike signed her when she was 15. She led her team to their championship. She averaged over 20 points per game her junior year. She averaged over 20 and 10 per game. A veteran of USA basketball. She's always played 2 years younger than her division. When she was under 16 and under, she was 14, 17 and under, she was 15. This past summer at 16, she played with the 19 and under team. I watched her in the Hoop Summit. She played 23 minutes. She had 19 points. She handled the ball. She's physically mature. She looks like she's been in college for 2 or 3 years already, and she's just 17. What do you like about her? I think of the 3 signees, because of injury situations with the other 2, she is really an impact player. What do you see when you see Jerzy Robinson?
Yeah, I see a confident playmaker, and I see a scorer. And I see similar to the way that Gotti is unafraid. I see that in Jerzy, and I think that's what you need as a freshman. And a lot of people assume, a freshman should be hesitant. A freshman should be, shouldn't be looking for their own shots all the time. I think Jerzy is incredibly mature. Even the way she carries herself, the way she talks, that shows in her game. And I think that if it ends up where Dawn maybe brings in a shooting guard in the portal and not a point guard, Jerzy can back up Maddie McDaniel and run the offense if needed. And she has some flexibility there. I think Jerzy, you want somebody that can basically create with little to nothing. And I've seen her do that. And I think that it will, pay off when she's in a system like South Carolina where ball movement is so key, but also is transition offense. So is, broken offense, or against broken defense. And I think that Jerzy is the type of player that is going to make her teammates better by the way that she plays. And I think that she's going to feed her, and Gotti are going to kind of be this almost two-headed confident duo. And I think Isla McDowell has some growing to do, but I think that in some ways what she lacks is that confidence in her own shot. Almost she looks hesitant when she shoots, whereas I think Jerzy is kind of the polar opposite, where she knows that she can make that shot or that pass, and it's not cocky, it's not show-offy. It is just no, I know I'm doing the right thing, and that's okay. And it's similar. It's what made, I think, Gotti and Joy so good as freshmen, and I think she has that same mentality.
I agree. All right, so before the WNBA draft, South Carolina hosted Virginia point guard Kamora Johnson, 5'7". She's a rising senior. She had a phenomenal junior year. She set the record for three-pointers made. She basically carried the team on her back to the Elite Eight. They beat Iowa at Iowa when the Iowa was the 2 seed and Virginia was the 10 seed. I really thought this was trending towards South Carolina, but there's purportedly UVA is willing to offer her $1 million to return for her senior year. She's from Charlottesville. We all know that UVA degree means something. What's the latest you're hearing on her? I kind of think, I know South Carolina is not paying her $1 million to come compete with Maddie McDaniel and Jerzy Robinson to play point guard.
Right. And I think too, like, it's not any reflection on South Carolina if she decides that, yes, it would be a financial incentive, but if she's like, why not stay one more year? She's from Charlottesville, obviously. That said, I'm hearing I would hit similar things. I think the clock is ticking in some ways. I think that a decision should be given, whether it already has, to Dawn or it hasn't, but obviously Dawn has a roster to build. Yes, the portal is open still for 4 more days and you can add after the period closes, but still, like, you want to be able to know. And I think that Dawn cares about her players too, in the sense that if she is making these moves where she's bringing in people and people feel as though, you know, this is all hypothetical, but, you know, if Dawn all of a sudden brings in 3 or 4 brand new guards, she doesn't want to screw over her players and have the portal be closed. And then she has way too many, you know, like, there's a strategy. Dawn has to think about everybody here. And so I imagine that a decision, whether it's she's staying at UVA or going somewhere else or not coming to South Carolina, or she is, like, I think that, it should happen soon and quickly based on what I hear, because I think that Dawn knows she has some other pieces to put together, and it all trickles down.
Very well said. So South Carolina and their staff, they were in New York for the WNBA draft. They flew back immediately after because they are hosting or have been hosting. I think they're probably still on campus and wrapping up this morning. One of the top players in the transfer portal and somebody very familiar to South Carolina, and that's Jordan Lee, starting guard from Texas, 6 foot, native of California, the number 9 player in her class. It was Texas, South Carolina, and Southern Cal. Well, Wendell Farrow was at Southern Cal recruiting her for them. Jolette Law, Dawn Staley, Lisa Boyer at South Carolina. She's played in the CLA. She knows how nuts it is. She's leaving Texas for a reason. I've kind of felt good about this one. My best source, when Jordan Lee went in the transfer portal, I immediately was notified it's looking good for South Carolina. Dawn Staley said she did want to add athleticism in the backcourt. So Jordan Lee, who will have 2 years of eligibility, which is a plus, and then probably, in my opinion, the top front court player in the class of 2026, Oliviyah Edwards from Tacoma, Washington. Her father's from Atlanta. I think she was born in Atlanta. They moved to Washington. She is making her second official visit to South Carolina. In the fall, she made her first visit to Tennessee. They got caught up. They committed. They thought they could take other visits. Tennessee said, oh, no, you won't. Tennessee lost all their players after the season. Literally everybody bolted. She asked for a release from her letter. I know you and I talked about this. I was told, you were told, she's reaching out to Dawn Staley. She's visiting South Carolina first. She's scheduled to visit Louisville and Washington, both Adidas schools. She is an Adidas signed athlete. Her AAU program was Adidas. But she's on that visit to South Carolina for a reason. She knows who's on the roster. She knows who's coming back next year. Yet she still chose to come to Columbia first. Your thoughts on, as we wrap it up with these two players?
Yeah, I was laying out sort of just thinking about how they both would fit. And it would definitely be, I think Dawn, it would be incredible if they were to get both. Dawn's in a really good spot because she doesn't technically need, both of them. That said, they would absolutely enhance the roster. I think Jordan Lee is almost like a Tessa with just some better defense right now. I think they play similarly, and that would just be a lethal backcourt if they were together. And I think it gives you, again, some versatility, a little bit more, because I think previously Dawn has had to go 11 or 12 on a roster, and then she saw a lot of injuries. And I think at times, unfortunately, I think that Dawn can't just depend on having, if she brings, Jerzy off the bench, it can't just be Jerzy and Isla. I think she needs one more person, whether that's Agat coming off the bench and Jordan starting. But I think she's really smart in sort of bringing a dominant shooting guard in, because I think that's just where they were that much better with Tanaya this year. I think with Oliviyah, obviously, to your point, she's well aware. I feel horrible for her in the sense that she clearly loved Tennessee, and it was the perfect school, and she had Adidas, and there was so much there to it. And, when your dreams don't work out, it's tough. And I applaud her if she is able to, go from a system which, with Caldwell, is you're not necessarily the star because of the hockey shifts, but would probably be able to have more individual spotlight there than here, because it's Chloe, Ashlyn, and Joyce this coming year. I think I'll applaud her if she does come here, because the thing about Dawn Staley is she is not promising a starting spot to anybody. She is having candid conversations. And if Oliviyah has those conversations and is able to say, I'll wait my turn, I want to be here, I can impact as a sophomore, I can come off the bench. And obviously she has the potential to do really great. I'm not saying that she would be not used as a freshman, but obviously she would play behind some really talented front court players. And so I do think that it would speak volumes to, her future if she does decide to go with South Carolina, which I wouldn't argue is the easy choice here. And it's definitely the one with the most, probably the biggest waiting room, and it's a little crowded. But at the same time, I think she could absolutely come off the bench and be an impact player. And to think that Dawn would have, they were all top 20 when they signed. I know that ESPN dropped all the rankings, but to get Jerzy and get Oliviyah and sort of still bring back and potentially not lose anyone in the portal, in the era of rev share, South Carolina isn't throwing money at people. They're realistic about their playing time, and they're realistic about their finances. And so another kind of thing that just speaks to Dawn Staley and her culture and her program and her coaching is if she's able to secure both of them right now, when, let's be real, I think they probably could find a school that would just throw a ton of money at them for them to be their one star.
I think 6 straight Final Fours and 3 national championships. If you want to go to the Final Four and you want to win, be developed, and go to the WNBA, I don't think there's any program outside of UConn, which is not really, they're like a perimeter-based system. I mean, South Carolina's the spot. I mean, yeah, you could go to Louisville. I mean, at Washington, their games aren't even on TV anywhere. So, and I mean, we don't know what the health is going to be of the players that are returning. But I do agree it is an uphill battle as a freshman. But then you think about it, that sophomore year, Oliviyah Edwards, Joyce Edwards and Allie Turnabees, that would be probably the best front court in the country. And you'd still have Jerzy, Gotti, Isla, Maddie would be a senior, Jordan Lee. I mean, that's another Final Four roster without another recruiting class or transfer portal.
To think that, exactly, like to think that, oh, Dawn would say, oh, no, we're losing Chloe, and oh, no, we're losing Ashlyn next year. But to look at your roster and still have Allie and potentially both Edwards is just like insane. It's but again, people come to South Carolina for a reason. They want to win.
You could go from Johnson and Johnson to Edwards and Edwards. All right, Lulu, great stuff. I kept you too long. Thanks so much for battling through and coming on. Great stuff. As always, as evidenced by almost 100 people being on here right now, they all care what you have to say, and you have delivered your own masterpiece today. Be well. And we'll look forward to catching up with you down the road. Hopefully there's a vacation in your near future.
Yes, I hope so. And thank you. Yes. Hopefully next time we talk, I need to beat this cold as soon as possible. But thank you for having me, as always.
All right. That is Lulu Kesin, who absolutely killed it. And we'll go from her. Alex Jones waited patiently in the green room. How are the snacks and the drinks in the green room?
Hey, I'm treated very well in the green room, I tell you.
All right.
Hey, I'm just glad that I'm here with my camera working. I feel like the last 2 times I've been on here, the camera hadn't been working. But, hey, here we are. We got it figured out.
Hey, it's amazing. You got all those technicians at 24/7 Sports to put you in the right studio. We got you live and in color today. And so, Alex, South Carolina has wrapped up spring practice over the weekend with Spring Fest. There was a concert. There were a lot of recruits there. I guess there was a practice in the morning, maybe a scrimmage. I don't know. Wasn't no spring game.
Yeah.
Shane Beamer did speak to the media on Tuesday. What was your major takeaways from that press conference and overall? Maybe let's just go with your thoughts and takeaways from Beamer's press conference, and then from what you've seen and heard on South Carolina's new offense with obviously the new coaches, Kendall Briles, Coach Clem, and Jason Smith on the offensive line, and Stan Drayton coaching up the running backs. Without a doubt, I think the best running backs coach at South Carolina, you'd probably have to go all the way back to Jay Graham, honestly. No slight on Bobby Bentley, who was a great recruiter, but he's a quarterback's coach. He'd tell you that.
Yeah, I think, kind of just starting with the offense, I think, some of the things you heard from either the Norris Sellers or some of the other players that talked during spring practice was just, their comfortability in the offense. I think, even talking to defensive players too, was hearing about the tempo of the offense, and not only the tempo of, how quickly they're running the plays, but how quick the plays are themselves. And I think when you talked to, the Norris Sellers a few weeks ago in his press conference, you could hear kind of his confidence that he has, his comfortability. And I think, one thing Shane Beamer talked about in his press conference the other day was, the kind of the practice structure that they had this spring, and something where they weren't focusing as much on the, 11-on-11 offense versus defense, but focusing on just getting the fundamentals down of, just football itself. But also I think that helped offensively to get that foundation of the offense down where you can then get those installs in later in spring practice. And I think there's just a comfortability in that offense right now. From Shane Beamer's press conference perspective, I think, hearing what the confidence they have in Matt Fuller and what he had to say about him, I think you can hear the steps he took this spring. And obviously he, flashed enough where he was named the offensive player this spring for the team. And I think that's a really good sign for that running back room, where you kind of entered spring practice in that room wondering, who was going to kind of take the reins of that room. And because they're all kind of very similar running backs, and there wasn't a Rocket Sanders coming in where you knew that, you knew before that season that Rocket Sanders was going to be the starting running back. But, I think Matt Fuller obviously has maybe created a little bit of separation in there. And I think you can maybe argue that it's him and Christian Clark kind of two right now in that running back room. But it's a deep room. And kind of to that point on specific players, I think you can continue to hear the praise that they're having for Noah Clark, the freshman defensive tackle. Like, he's just, they talk about how underestimated the athleticism that he brings. And, that question for him and really Aiden Harris too was how much were they going to be needed in that defensive tackle room, because it's a deep room with guys returning and also what they had in the transfer portal. But, we'll see what his role is going to look like. But he's obviously off to a very good start and, maybe could end up being a guy that's too good to keep off the field.
No doubt. All right, so I got to ask you this, because two major pieces for this South Carolina team, you could argue the most important offensive player, even with Lenora Sellers, was NC State transfer left tackle Jakarius Peak. He suffers the patellar tendon issue or injury. He has the surgery. And then Dylan Stewart, who in November had back issues. And full disclosure here, I've had 2 lower back surgeries for herniated disc, L5, both of them. I used to be 6'4", now I'm 6'3", because my L5 disc is gone from regular size to almost non-existent. But I was up walking around after surgery the same day, pain-free. I mean, if you have a bulging disc, they can inject it. If it's like muscle issues, you don't do anything, you rest. But, I mean, we're 6 months later, and they're still talking about Dylan Stewart having to rest. And we all know Shane Beamer is not the most forthcoming, when it comes to the real truth of injuries. But, I mean, these are South Carolina's top 2 draft-eligible players in my mind, okay? Premium positions, not taking anything away from Lenora Sellers. Hell, I hope he's a number 1 overall pick, because that means South Carolina's had a hell of a year.
Yeah.
But from what you're hearing behind the scenes, what's really the situation with Dylan Stewart? Because, I mean, look, we've already seen Clint Haggard and that training staff essentially ruin Juice Wells' career, okay? Yeah, he transferred to Ole Miss. He was never the same after he re-broke that foot, scoring a touchdown in Athens to put South Carolina up 14-3 right before the end of the first half, okay? I mean, what's the deal with Dylan Stewart? I mean, as somebody who has called on orthopedic surgeons, who is friends with multiple orthopedic surgeons, I mean, to me, it seems like maybe there should have been a surgery in November, early December, and there wasn't. And this dude's junior year is in jeopardy. What are you hearing?
Yeah, obviously, Shane Beamer said the other day that, and it's kind of been their message, consistent message about Dylan Stewart was, all the, opinions they've gotten about his back issue is just to completely rest it and not do anything. And I think it's one of those where you got to be careful with it, because with those back injuries, if you're out there doing some things, and you're going to be kind of, moving yourselves a little bit differently, just because those back injuries can kind of, obviously they just cause a lot of pain. And if you're moving differently, you can maybe hurt something else. So I think, with Dylan Stewart, they knew that he doesn't need a spring practice, and he does, because he knows the system. He's the type of player he is. Just rest it and then get him 100% for preseason camp, and I think just find a way to get him healthy. And it is a little bit concerning just because it has gone on this long with the back issue and it hasn't gotten better. But you have to just hope that the rest is going to get that back healthy from whatever the injury was that he had last year, and just find a way to get him healthy. And then with Pete, I think it sounds like things are still on track where Shane Beamer has talked about how they're optimistic he'll be ready to go for the beginning of the season. And it's one where with him, you would have wanted him to have that, spring practice just because he's new to the system. He's new to the offensive line. You want it because they're having to do so much mixing and matching on that offensive line with him out because you say Jakari Speaks in there, like that solves your left tackle problem, and Shed Surratt can move around and play his best positions and things like that. So I think you want to be able to get him back as quickly as you can for preseason camp to start figuring out that offensive line because, even if he's back for that week 1 against Kent State or week 3 or whatever for the first SEC game, you're still going to have to, get him back into that play and shape and things like that. Then you're also going to have to figure out, where are the best pieces for those other guys where with him not being able to practice right now, you're not be able to potentially have your best 5 out there in the best 5 combination.
I agree. I mean, the last thing you need is for it to be like a Luke Doty situation in, I guess, was it 21 or 22, like you had Colonel Zebulaiah. Luke was working his way back. He had gone live in practice, one practice. Zeb gets his hand stepped on in the first quarter, and Luke Doty has to go in like one practice.
Yeah.
I mean, offensive line, those are big men, okay? It takes a big man like that longer to get in physical condition to be able to play that position. I mean, honestly, you can argue that's the most taxing position in football because not only are you over 300 pounds, but in the SEC, you're facing the best jumbo athletes in the world that are not yet in the National Football League on every play, and it's like a head-on collision, pushing, pulling, with everything. So
I think you never want these 2 injuries to happen, but with those guys out, it has helped them build a little bit of depth at those 2 positions, I think, where now, they can figure out, more of the depth from an offensive line standpoint, but specifically at that edge spot too. I mean, you saw Anthony Addison get most improved defense. Like, I think that was huge to get those reps that he got. Julian Walker, it was pretty big for him to get those reps that he got, and Caleb Herring and those guys. So, obviously at that, I think more so at that edge spot, that has kind of been a little bit of a help where they can get those reps because with Dylan Stewart not being there, you got to have – they basically had about 4 or 5 guys throughout that practice because they were still battling some injuries with, George Wilson coming back, Jaquavius Dodd battling some injuries there. So it has allowed them to build a little bit of depth and see more of what they're going to have behind those guys.
I mean, I do think that is the silver lining, especially at that position. So let's look at what we know on the offensive line, and then we're going to go to defensive line. I only want to talk about 2 positions on each side of the football today. So on the offensive line, I think we do know Carter Miller is pretty much entrenched as the starting center. I think you have good depth there with Nolan Hay as the backup. He was probably the best center on the roster last year. He just was not healthy. At right guard, I think we know Emmanuel Poku, the transfer from East Carolina. He seems entrenched there. And we know Shed Surratt is going to play somewhere. I mean, he was playing right tackle, and then they moved him to left tackle. And Hank the Tank Purvis is playing left guard. That was great experience for him. Dane Arnett, I think, finished the spring playing at right tackle. And you got Seth Edwards at left tackle. Shed Surratt now can play both tackles. Demola Adjudant, it looks like they moved him around, some cross training at guard and tackle. I don't know where he's going to play. Ebu Badike, I just saw him on a video pronounce his name. Nabugu, everybody just calls him Boo, so we'll call him Boo.
Yeah.
LSU fans call Dawn Staley their Boo, but that's a different situation. I think he can factor in at guard or maybe tackle. I know, everybody's talking about Darius Gray like, oh, well, he's just going to come right in and play tackle. I mean, that dude's 6'3", probably 275. He played basketball. I mean, I'm not saying he can't, but realistically, he's an interior offensive lineman. I mean, you do have the most interesting man in the world getting ready to come in, but he's never played American football. Neff G was 6'8", 295. I mean, realistically, you want, if you can get Jacarius Peet back, and he's the left tackle, and let's say Hank Purvis is the left guard, or maybe Nabugu overtakes him because of how athletic he is. And then you got Shed Surratt at right tackle, where he finished the season. And Carter Miller at center, and Kojo Poku at the right guard. I mean, that's a pretty salty starting five right there.
Yeah, I think so. And what's going to be interesting is what happens with Shed Surratt when Pete comes back. Does he move to that right tackle spot, or does he go to a guard spot? And I think a lot of that would be based on, if Pete is not ready to go week one, how the offensive line's performing, who needs to be, who could potentially be replaced. But I would think you would have to move him to a tackle spot, maybe that right tackle spot, just because he has shown that he can do it in the SEC level. And I think, you start to see some consistency from an offensive line standpoint in spring practice at those guard spots and really the center spot, like Hank Purvis, Carter Miller, Emmanuel Poku. Like, it seemed to be pretty consistent, those guys working with the first group that they had out there that we saw in practice. And, I think Carter Miller, you feel pretty good that guy's going to be the starting center. And I think it's just those tackle spots starting to get that figured out. But it seemed like they started to find a pretty consistent group at those tackle spots too. And then, as you mentioned, you still got Darius Gray coming in. Like, what's he going to be able? Is he going to be a guy that can come in right away? Like, he's going to have to, get in the weight room and then pick up the system. But he's a very smart football player. I think he can. But I think we'll see there. And then obviously it's just the peak. Yeah, I think the peak is going to be the biggest question. Like, how quickly is he going to get back? Is he going to be ready to go week one? Is he going to be is it going to be a week 3 type of situation for him where you maybe try to get him some reps there on that offensive line? And I think another interesting guy to kind of keep an eye on too is Zion Giles. And this one, I think he had a really good spring and really physical player that going to be interesting to see where he kind of fits in from a position standpoint too. But you obviously got to have depth too on the offensive line. I mean, it just seems like every team's going to have injuries there on the offensive line, so you're going to need some depth at those tackle spots where I think you see Armando Nieves kind of filling in there. Seth Smith was a guy that got some work from a first group perspective as well. And you mentioned Bubba DK. I probably just butchered that too, but I think he's a guy that can kind of has some versatility where he can play a few different spots. But the one that was interesting to me and the kind of most interesting note we got from an offensive line standpoint was Damola Edgerton getting some work at guard. One of those last practices, like, it's something that I can see. Now, if you asked me last year, I would say, that guy's probably a tackle just from a size perspective. But I think he's gotten bigger and stronger where I could see him getting some of that guard work from a depth perspective. And I think some of that could be, watching Zion Giles. Maybe he's a guy that they could really see being a tackle of the future as well. So it's a few interesting notes. So I think they do have built some depth there. Obviously, you'll get Neff Jiwa in and what can he do from a depth perspective. Like, could be a thing where he needs a year just to get that football experience. But you do see some depth options building there, and that's something that they had to have after you watch these past few seasons.
So, in my opinion, I think defensive tackle is probably they have the most quality depth on the roster, but I'm starting to think wide receiver may rival that. I mean, look, we all know Nick Harbor, Jaden Sellers, Nitro Tuggle. I mean, that'd probably be your first 3, and Donovan Murph right there. We all know about those guys. Okay, Tuggle is the new guy from the transfer portal. He won a spring award. He's been electric, a lot like Vandrevis Jacobs, who they lost in the portal to Miami. He got a big bag to go home. But now it's the resurgence of Mazeo Bennett. DJ Black going full circle, coming back home from Limestone, where he played for Mike Furry, to Central Florida, where he was a major factor last year, and a guy that ran 500 meters on the track for South Carolina as a freshman. And then the emergence of a young guy in Jordan Gidron, who was injured, didn't even play much his junior year of high school, graduated early, enrolled at mid-year of his junior year in high school. He just said, peace out, I'm going to college. I got the credits. You hear a lot about him. And even though Jaden Gibson was not a full go at 6'5", over 200 pounds, and a guy that can run like a deer, there's a lot of optimism around him. And I still hadn't mentioned Malik Clark or Lex Cyrus yet.
Yeah.
I mean, Mike Furry's got a lot of dudes now.
I think, if you're thinking about that wide receiver room, it's a really good thing to hear about DJ Black and what he was able to do this spring. Like, he was one that, you saw the experience he got under Mike Furry at Limestone. Then you saw him take it to UCF and at that level be a pretty good, consistent receiver. And now you just want to see him have a good first spring at South Carolina. And, I think he adds to that depth of that room where, I think if you can get it to 8 in that room that you feel really good about, which the way it's looking right now, you think you can probably get to 8 in, because you'll maybe run some 4 wide sets under the Kendall Browse, and you're going to have some rotating, maybe not as much during drives, but from drive to drive, have some rotations in there. I think a key kind of X factor for this room is Jaden Gibson. And what is he able to give you? He was obviously having to still get healthy this spring. How much can he give you? Because he just gives you kind of a skill set that there's not much that doesn't really have in this wide receiver at his size, where he can be a red zone threat, where he can go up and get those jump ball types of things. Like, they love to kind of do those types of things in Kendall Browse's offense. What can Jaden Gibson give you? It's kind of, I think, a big question for that wide receiver. But even if Gibson maybe doesn't quite give you what you want, I think you still have a lot of good depth in that room. Like, Donovan Murphy, I think, is a guy to continue to keep an eye on. Like, he was really good as a freshman, saw it coming on for him. And then what can, as you mentioned, Jordan Gidron or Malik Clark give you? Like, those guys were starting to take some steps in spring practice too. Mazio Bennett and his resurgence, as you mentioned, that's a big storyline. You can hear just, those coaches, Shane Beamer and Mike Furry, really kind of glowed, in talking about him, where how consistent he has. And you can hear it in Mazio Bennett's voice too. Like, obviously he didn't have the season he wanted last year, but how much he wants to be at South Carolina, how, last year was a little bit of a disappointment, how he wants to bounce back from it. And it sounds like he had a really good spring too. So I think, and then obviously you mentioned Nitro Tugwell too. I think he, has been just about as expected during spring practice, and maybe better too. I think he really started to come on there towards the back half of that spring practice. So it's a deep room that I think when you looked at it coming into spring practice, you thought it had the potential to be a very deep room with quality depth. But I think you really started to see that emerge in Mike Furry's room, where they've got a chance to be in that 8 range, I think, which is kind of 7 to 8 range is where they want to be from a depth standpoint.
No doubt. All right, so defensive tackle. I mean, South Carolina's never had this many guys at defensive tackle, but when you look at it, I love the roster construction here at defensive tackle, because they're not all seniors. They're not all juniors. They've spread it out with really good high school recruiting and younger guys in the portal, like adding a Troy Pikes last year, this year, a Jordan Thomas.
Yeah.
And then even laying in the hospital, well, I mean, they were already committed, but Travian Robertson, Aiden Gibson, and Noah Clark. I mean, when I look at it, and not only do you have the notorious GBD, Gabriel Brownlow Dindy, who I think is set to have a monster senior year.
Yep.
And you got Troy Pikes. But then to add Tomiwa DeRozier from Illinois, who he's a nomad. He's moved every year, I think. but he's a player. He is a big-time player. By all accounts, he's similar size-wise to TJ Sanders, maybe the same kind of player, that twitchiness, pass rush ability. He's a former defensive end. And then you got Pikes. You got Kelby Collins, who South Carolina, hell, I think he probably set the record for most official visits to South Carolina with 3 of them. One out of high school, once when he left Florida, and then when he left Alabama. And he's, by all accounts, he's put on weight. But here's the thing with Kelby Collins. He's got positional versatility. And so if Dylan Stewart is not ready, if Dylan Stewart cannot go, could you see Kelby Collins moving out to one of those edge spots to where if Stewart can't go, you got him, and then you got Caleb Herring and Julian Walker, who I think that's a coin flip at that other edge spot, just to have more SEC experience at that, to have 2 guys on the field like that at the same time.
Yeah, if South Carolina wanted to add a player to that edge room, I think Kelby Collins is probably top of the list of who the guys that you would move there. We've always kind of talked about Donovan Darden potentially being that guy that you move there. That's hasn't happened yet. He's stayed in that linebacker room, and it would be a process for him from a physical standpoint for him to get ready to play that spot. So I think it would be Kelby Collins, and he can do a little bit of that. I wonder even if Dylan Stewart's playing in week 1, I wonder if they still will have some certain packages where they put Kelby Collins out there on the edge, because he can do a little bit of both. Where I think we talked about a little bit where South Carolina has some struggles from a run stopping standpoint at edge last year. I think he's one where he's a good pass rusher, but he can also really hold up on the edge from a run standpoint too. So I wonder even if regardless of Dylan Stewart, I wonder if they will have some packages for him in there, but. With that defensive tackle room, you just kept naming names in that room, and every name that you named, you're like, okay, I can see that guy playing. And I think it's one where, if you're trying to, project a depth chart, it's hard to decide who the starter is going to be, just because there's a lot of different options that you could see happening. I can see it being a Gabriel Brown-Lundendi. That guy's going to play a lot regardless. But Troy Pikes, that guy we've talked about a lot, was playing so good towards the end of the season. And then you got Tomiwa Durajayi, who, along with Noah Clark, was newcomer of the spring on defense. That just shows the depth of that room. Where then you get to those freshmen, what do Aiden Harris and Noah Clark give you? I think they're going to play some special teams, but everybody just keeps talking about Noah Clark, and not only the coaches but the players talking about Noah Clark and how impressive he's been. Can he work himself into that rotation? And you think back to 24 with that defensive attack room with TJ Sanders, Tonka Hemingway, and those guys, Boogie Huntley. They rotated around 4 or 5 or so was kind of that range they want to be in. And I think that is, you want to be able to be in that range. I think they will have no issue being in that range. The question is going to be who is in that rotation, who works themselves in there, because Travian Robinson, he's going to want competition every day in practice and in that room. It's going to be serious competition to get into that rotation, because that's without naming Caleb Williams or Christian Ingram, who's entering another year in the program, who both of those guys are really intriguing, and Christian Ingram especially, because you probably throw Caleb Williams in here too, because they have the size for that room and are really impressive, and they're coming off some injuries from last year. But it's just there's so many options in that room where, as you mentioned off the top too, they've done a really good job of creating having really good balance in that room from an upperclassman and freshman standpoint, where it seems like that room's in a good spot for the future as well.
No doubt. I mean, Christian Williams was getting ready to, Caleb Williams was getting ready to play.
Yeah.
And he broke his leg in practice during game week. Christian Ingram, you beat Southern Cal and Michigan for him. I mean, he's 6'6", 315 pounds, but Noah Clark. I don't think South Carolina has ever had a guy like Noah Clark. I mean, outside of Georgia and Alabama had that real big dude one year at nose guard that blocked that field goal when Lane Kiffin was the coach at Tennessee. I'll never forget that. But you just don't see many guys that are 6'5", 340 pounds. This dude's 17, 18 years old, and every player that's interviewed just says, man, you look at knowing how big he is and you think, no, that dude probably he can't move, but man, he's explosive. He's fast. He can run to the ball. I can't believe how big and fast he is. And I mean, there's something to be said for that. I mean, if you're 6'5", 340, you're probably eating a double team.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I know Gabriel Brownlow-Dendy, he did that last year at 315. But I mean, Aiden Harris, he's 287. He'll be 295 in the fall. I mean, he's still growing. All these guys are going to have from now until August in the weight room. I mean, this is just an extremely deep. You've got guys that have a lot of experience. You've got redshirt guys. You've got 2 true freshmen that are high end. I mean, if you were at a big time steakhouse, that'd be your Wagyu beef right there.
Yeah.
I mean, it's tomahawk, like $175 for that steak. But
I think what's really impressive about what the freshmen were able to do in spring is, the saying is always, the closer you get to the ball, the harder it is for freshmen to play. You can't get any closer to the ball than what the D tackles are. And I mean, those guys, obviously you heard about Aiden Harris, but you heard a lot about Noah Clark. Like, those guys get off to a really good start, and it's looking like 2 huge recruiting wins for South Carolina in that space.
No doubt. So last thing, and then I'm going to let you go. Well, really 2 things. So safety. So Peyton Williams, he won the award as like the defensive MVP of the spring. We heard Clayton White and Torian Gray talk about how they were putting on him to be the leader of that secondary room, to become more of a vocal leader. It seems like he has embraced that. David Busey, a hard-hitting dude from Savannah that was overlooked by a lot of people. He's been really good. He's starting. But then I look and I see these 2 6'4", 210-pound dudes, and Kendall Daniels and Jazavian Currents, and I wonder, man, that's some really great depth. How long can David Busey hold off both of those guys? Because, I mean, it's a great problem to have. And, I mean, there are other guys, too, in that safety room. But it seems like those are the 4 names you hear the most about.
Yeah, and, we've seen with Torian Gray, like, sometimes they've had to throw some freshmen in there. You think back to Nick Emenworthy and DQ Smith's first season, like, they got thrown in there and they were ready to play after RJ Roderick got hurt. So those guys, they're not afraid to play freshmen or younger players at those safety spots. And, Current's just he's a player. I mean, he's just like, he, seems like, you wondered with him, like, just from a physical standpoint, how much work he had to do. But, I think he's come in and he's been pretty impressive too. But Kendall Daniels just at that size, and he got some playing time last year in some certain packages on third down packages. Like, you do wonder, like, how close they are to being in that starting role. But David Busey too is just like, I think he gets probably a little bit overshadowed because people are wondering about Kendall Daniels and Jazavian Currents. But I mean, that guy can play too, and he's going to be an older guy. He's going to be in 3rd year in the system coming up. So I think it's just, he's one where I think he's going to know the defense. So experience is going to help him. And he's also a really good player too. Like, they, those safeties have to play the run too. And both Peyton Williams and David Busey aren't afraid to do that. But it's going to be competition in that safety room for that spot. Like, I think you feel pretty good. Peyton Williams is going to play a role there. He's going to probably have that starting role in game 1, but who's going to be that other safety spot? There's going to be legit competition there. And, it's another one of those spots that we talk about with D tackle or receiver where, all three options, whoever starts, you'd be like, okay, I think that has a chance to really work out there.
No doubt. All right, so recruiting, it's kind of like Gordon Gecko said, money never sleeps. Recruiting never sleeps. Shane Beamer said this spring, South Carolina had the most prospects come on their campus that had a scholarship offer from South Carolina since he has been the head coach there. But then last week you had 2 of South Carolina's commitments decommit, both for different reasons. I want you to tell us about both of these. Jaden Kelly Murray, the wide receiver, evidently he has put out some bad 40 times, and there may be, there are some other issues there, but the guy that you really love, but you knew it was going to be a battle, Amari Fountain, the 6'3", 190-pound corner, he flipped over the weekend. He was in Gainesville from Florida to South Carolina. And so tell us about Jaden Murray, and then do we expect South Carolina to just move on from Fountain, or is this a guy like we've seen in the past with Julian Walker and Jalewis Solomon and other guys that commit, and South Carolina says, nah, we're going to battle all the way to signing day?
Yeah, we'll start with Jaden Kelly Murray. Like, there was some talk, obviously about Virginia Tech there late last week. And, I think it's just one of those where, obviously the 40 time was out there. And South Carolina's got some other guys there on that wide receiver board right now. Like Ivian Lewis is a guy from Virginia who's come down for an official visit. They got DJ Huggins from Georgia, who's, I think South Carolina secretly or quietly kind of in a good spot there for him, a guy that has got some other options to some high SEC options, but they've kind of worked themselves in a good spot there. So what's going to be interesting from a wide receiver room is the numbers and what they look like, what they're going to take there, because they still have that big freshman class who's now in their second year in their program. So I think it's one of those where they'll end up being okay there. They'll find what they need to find there. I'm already found, that's one where he's a really, really good player, and one that you wanted to find a way to keep, a guy that's 6'3", 190 and moves really, really well. And, and when I talked to him at Myrtle Beach, you kind of got the sense that it was going to be a battle for him. There's still some teams that are coming after him, which you expected with how good he was. And, you saw him kind of quickly rise in their rankings too. It's one of those where, Torian Gray, it's always just going to be one where they'll find the next guy. You've seen this happen before with South Carolina. Interesting enough, they offered a 6'3" corner out of North Laconia, which I just kind of got to laugh at whenever his name popped up, and I saw that. I was like, well, that's Torian Gray right there, 6'3" corner. Like, it fits, and they've obviously had their eye on him. So I think that's one you'll see kind of move pretty quickly. It's going if he takes an official visit. But that was pretty funny too that I saw that. But like I said, with Torian Gray, he's always going to find those next guys. And I'll say Jannard Albright, they still got him committed. He's a really good safety guy that's got that physical frame, kind of like a Kendall Daniels and Xavier Currents. That's really good. So they're okay in the secondary. Like, it's hard to worry about Torian Gray because he always kind of finds those next guys if they hit in a situation like this. And I kind of found like we'll see if they keep up with them, but they're obviously they've got a pretty big board there.
I mean, it kind of reminds me like last year, Tamari Watkins, he committed to Texas A&M. The next day, South Carolina offers Tristan Lewis, and he commits. And everybody's like, well, this guy's a high school quarterback. It's a projection. He'll be a safety. And now this dude at almost 6'3", 200, and probably end up being 210 at least by the time the season gets here. He's in the mix to be on the depth chart at corner. Yeah. Koski Barnes, another freshman. And so,
and there's another name to keep an eye on too at that corner spot is Brandon Allen, who's a 6'2", 175-pound corner from Westlake. He's committed to Mississippi State. South Carolina offered him when he came on a visit a few weeks ago, and quickly there was an official visit set up with him. So that's another one, 6'2", 6'3". These corners are all from where that board they're okay in that defensive background. They'll be fine.
Right, and at wide receiver, to me, you can really afford to be picky there because you have so many guys. Like, I'm only taking a real stud at that position, because it's not like on the offensive line where you're going to have like 7 or 8 seniors. At wide receiver, most all these guys outside of Nick Harbor and DJ Black, they have multiple. I mean, they have 2 or 3 or 4 years of eligibility, not to mention Sequel Patterson, who's coming in this summer, who's a big-time receiver. I mean, you really have a luxury there of really being picky if you're Mike Furry.
Yeah, and they've got another official visit set up now with Jerzy Robinson, who they, I've kind of been looking at, 4-star guy from McKeesport, Pennsylvania. So again, it's another one where they've kind of got their options there where they'll end up being okay. They'll get that figured out.
All right, so like we said, recruiting never sleeps. Yesterday was the first day coaches could be out on the road. I'm pretty sure South Carolina had their full allotment of the maximum guys you can have out on the road. We're on the road 2 weeks from tomorrow, May the 1st. They're bringing, according to the Big Spur, 13 guys are scheduled for official visits May the 1st. That South Carolina, Shane Beamer said, we just decided let's go earlier and let's get the first visit and really set the tone. Like Dawn Staley in the transfer portal, she used to want the last visit. Then that didn't work out with a couple players. One of them, Kim Mulkey, paid her an extra $100,000 not to visit South Carolina after she visited LSU. That's Anissa Morrow. Now, Dawn, she's wanting the first visit. And we see that happen. Lulu and I talked about that a good bit before you came on. But Shane Beamer wanting to set the tone here with a lot of 4-star guys. I'm looking at this list. I mean, it looks like 9 or 10 of the 13 are at least 4-star guys here.
Yeah, it's going to be, quite a kickoff to the official visit season on that May 1st weekend. Like, Fred Ards is going to be in. He's an edge from Orlando, Florida. I know that he's, one of the multiple edges that South Carolina's after in that class. He's going to end up being one of the top ones, but he's a really, really good player. So that's going to be one to watch. Rosen Randall, the linebacker from Gardner, North Carolina, was just in pretty recently, and he's going to be one to watch too. I think Clayton White and Trade Money and those guys have kind of identified him. They've got some linebacker targets, and he's going to be one of them. Desmond Malpress, I think South Carolina's at a pretty good spot for an edge from Atlantic Coast. So kind of keep an eye on there. You got Kennedy Green coming in, who South Carolina's been in a really good spot for a long time. Jabaiah Smith, linebacker from Swainsboro, another one that they've identified early on is going to be in. So, yeah, I think, one that, I mentioned Brandon Allen, too. He's going to be in that weekend. The one to kind of really keep an eye on to watch here, I think it's going to be interesting to watch his recruitment, is Braden Tyson, the running back from Georgia. He's one where South Carolina's got kind of, a handful of running backs to run on. He's one of them. Trey Segar, Aiden Gibson, Javaris Warner, who's a Cincinnati commitment. But Tyson, he's a really good running back, guy that's really physical too, big physical running back that can move. He's going to be one to keep an eye on. And he actually made in for 2 spring practices, which I thought was interesting. He made in earlier, and then one of the last practices he was in so I think there's some legit interest there, and that you got to battle Miami and Florida State for him. But Miami's kind of off to a really good start recruiting, as you would expect. That they've got some running backs, and I think they got one committed. So kind of keep an eye on there. It's going to be, from a running back standpoint, a numbers standpoint, kind of like I was talking with wide receiver, what's the numbers going to look like in that running back room? But he's going to be one that I think is going to be one to watch too.
I mean, 6 foot 235. I mean, that's I know Kevin Harris wasn't quite that tall, but he was a big, thick, physical guy that nobody thought, well, he's probably not a home run hitter. And then he had a 75-yard touchdown run against Auburn that was called back. But we found out in a hurry he could run. Rocket Sanders, a lot of people thought would be a big wide receiver or a tight end, and he was 230 pounds. But this guy, and plus, you said, I mean, all 6 guys in the running back room have eligibility remaining. There's no seniors in that room. So it'll be interesting for sure. Alex Jones, Hale McGranahan, John Whittle, all holding it down at thebigspur.com. Alex, I can't thank you enough. Appreciate your patience there in the green room. Hopefully they took good care of you.
I was treated well for sure.
There. You may have had an omelet bar in there this morning. So, be well, my friend. It's going to be crazy from now until, I guess, media days, after media days, and there'll be fall camp. Not much rest for the weary. Be well, and always appreciate your time, and we'll catch up with you down the road.
Absolutely. Always enjoy being on. See you next time.
Yep. All right. So, man, what a show. Great live attendance today. Appreciate everybody watching on YouTube. If you're not subscribed, hit the like button, subscribe. You'll get a notification as soon as we put out our guests for the next week. But, man, love the interest. It's an interesting time of year. We could find out something later today or tomorrow on Jordan Lee. I think you're going to hear quickly if it's South Carolina on Kamora Johnson. Like Lulu Kesin said, Dawn Staley's not going to let it play out. You know, here's the great news. Nobody for South Carolina's entered the transfer portal. And I think even if they add Oliviyah Edwards and even one of the two guards, Kamora Johnson or Jordan Lee, personally, I prefer Jordan Lee because I feel confident Jerzy Robinson can play some point guard, and so can Gotti and Tessa Johnson at times. Joyce Edwards brought the ball up. I mean, let me remind you, in 2022, when South Carolina won the national championship, Destiny Henderson got injured. She was the only point guard on the roster. Yeah, Zia Cook was around. Dawn Staley put 6'4" forward Letitia Amihir, a.k.a. L.A., at point guard, and they were just fine. They got through it. Look, let me also tell you, Maddie McDaniel, if she would have had 12 more assists, she would have been the NCAA leader in assist to turnover ratio. She didn't qualify because you have to have 100 assists. She had 88. But she had 5.18 assists to every one turnover. That wouldn't have just led the SEC. That would have been number one in the country. And by the way, she was a McDonald's All-American. And by the way, she played really, really well in that UConn game. Raven Johnson picked up a mysterious second foul in that game. And it really, even Dee Cantner, who screwed South Carolina out of the national championship in 23, all she could say was it should have been a no call. But Maddie McDaniel, Mouse, is in the house, and she's waited her turn. And we know Dawn Staley rewards players that wait their turn. I mean, it's not like she's a scrub, okay? She's from the DMV, from Baltimore. They know how to play up there. They're tough. Mouse is quick. She can get in the lane. She's a great passer. She doesn't turn the ball over much. When you could put Gotti, Jordan Lee, Tessa Johnson, Jerzy Robinson, and all of these post players, Chloe Kitts, Joyce Edwards, Ashlyn Watkins, Allie Turnabees, and maybe Big O, Oliviyah Edwards. I mean, you don't have to have a point guard that's going to score 20 points a game when you have all those elite players around her. You need somebody that can run your offense, get you into your stuff, play defense, and not turn the ball over. Mouse can do all of that. I've seen her do it in person, and I've watched her on the biggest stage do it against UConn, who was invincible, unbeatable, according to everybody from ESPN. No shot. I mean, it really wasn't that close. So the demise of Dawn Staley is always greatly exaggerated, and you bet against her at your own peril. Okay. This team is going nowhere. That's why elite players are still coming, even though they may have to wait their turn. Maybe Oliviyah Edwards is okay with waiting her turn, because since she's been watching basketball in the 6th grade, South Carolina's been the Final Four every time, and they've won it 3 times. I mean, hey. And since she's been in high school, South Carolina's been in the national championship game every time. And they were 38-0 one of those times. And embarrassed Caitlin Clark in Iowa in the national championship. And embarrassed Gino to the point I didn't even talk about it. I mean, that dude, he's lost his marbles. He thought, oh, man, I beat Dawn 2 times in a row. I'm back on top. We're going Sarah Strong. We're going to go on a run like we were with Stewart. We're going to win 4 straight. I got AZ, Paige. I had Paige last year. No cigar today, Gino. And then you blow a gasket and embarrass yourself and your university. And then you put out, excuse my language, a bullshit apology the first time where you don't even mention Dawn Staley by name. He didn't show up at the WNBA draft, even though he had the #1 pick, probably because he knew the Hall of Famer Holly Rowe would have waltzed over there and asked him about it. I mean, it took him 2 times to get the apology right. Does anybody really believe if that thing would have been over a handshake and UConn would have won, he would have even brought it up? No, he didn't like it because Dawn Staley's team embarrassed his team on national TV in the Final Four and deprived him for the 3rd straight time UConn has been undefeated coming into the Final Four. They have not won a national championship. Or maybe 3 out of 4. I think maybe in 2018 they did win it with Breanna Stewart. But I know that Mississippi State beat them. I was there. 111 straight wins. Itty bitty in overtime. The shot heard round the world. Then Notre Dame beat them. Now South Carolina beat them. They were undefeated. So I just think Gino can't handle the fact that he is not the king of women's college basketball anymore. It's not all about him. Dawn Staley, 6 straight Final Fours in a row. That's more than UConn the last 6 years. I mean, yeah, Gino's been to 24, 25 Final Fours. He's won 12 national championships. Congratulations. There's no doubt he's legendary. Nobody will beat that record. Not even Dawn. But Dawn Staley, in my opinion, South Carolina should be the prohibitive favorite. And if they land Jordan Lee, Oliviyah Edwards, I mean, that's a wrap. They're just going to have to not get injured and stay healthy and get through the regular season. It'll be kind of boring because they'll be spanking teams, not as bad as UConn because they do play in a real actual conference where there are other top 10 teams. But man, South Carolina's roster, it's already scary. You add one or two more high-profile players to this roster, forget about it. All right, that's a wrap for me. We should hopefully there'll be good news on the transfer portal watch for men and women. By the end of the week, we'll have it covered tomorrow afternoon on Gamecock Pod Daily on Friday, and then pretty sure we'll have Sunday morning coffee talk. And if there are commitments over the weekend, we'll talk about them then. So appreciate everybody being on today. For special thanks to Lulu Kesin and Alex Jones. It was a great show. SK Long says 6 straight Final Fours is phenomenal. If these 2 signings happen, wow. I mean, all I can say is no doubt about it. All right, so appreciate everybody being on. Keith Allsep saying, go Gamecocks, God bless, and God protect our troops. And I'm ready for gas prices to go back down. I don't know about y'all. We'll be back next week. Until then, I'm out of here, everybody. Be safe, be well. Until next time.